Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. After being reborn, I poured all my energy into preparing for the college entrance exam. I no longer clung to my childhood friend, Ethan Green, because in my previous life, a fire broke out in the research lab. I didn't hesitate to rush in and save him while he was trying to rescue critical data, and I ended up severely burned. Later, because of the rumors about my so-called life-saving favor, he was forced to marry me. But Ethan never loved me. In fact, one time when he was drunk, I overheard him say that if he had known he'd be tied to me forever, he would have rather died loving Janie. At that moment, I felt like I had fallen into an ice cellar. All those years, I never realized that Ethan had never forgotten his first love. He even kept it from me and told our children the love story between them. Even our kids believed I had ruined the romance of Ethan's life, that I was the reason he never got what he truly wanted. Then I woke up in this new life, and suddenly I heard Ethan's young voice echo in my ears. If things go wrong, you have to come save me. But in this life, I only want to live for myself. I'm sorry, but your safety is your own responsibility. Ethan suddenly looked up at me, disbelief in his eyes. Even the step he was about to take toward the burning lab froze midair. In a stunned voice he asked again, "Do you even know what you just said?" I said, "I wanted you to come save me, and you actually refused." I didn't hesitate at all. Right there in front of everyone, I replied, "Of course I did. There are so many people here. Why should I, a young woman, be the one to save you, Ethan Green? Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" The crowd around us, who had been watching the drama unfold, burst into laughter. In my previous life, I had heard Ethan's cry for help and rushed into the fire without thinking. I even put my protective suit on him, which caused me to suffer severe burns all over my body. But not only did Ethan show no sympathy or gratitude, he hated me even more for it. He said that just looking at me gave him nightmares, and that I constantly emitted a disgusting smell. He said that if it weren't for the fact that I had saved his life, he wouldn't even look at me. I endured all of this in silence because I thought he was right. With my burned face and body, I did look terrifying. But then one day, out of the blue, he proposed to me. I later found out that Ethan was at a critical point in the lab's promotion evaluation. Other colleagues used the fact that I saved him to attack his credibility. Pressured by gossip and tempted by the benefits of a promotion, he married me. Back then, I foolishly believed that was the happiest moment of my life, never realizing it was the beginning of a nightmare. After the wedding, he barely shared a bed with me and constantly said the most hurtful things. In the end, he even injected me with a virus that caused my wounds to fester. As I lay on the bed waiting to die, I finally discovered all of his secrets. He didn't love me. He actually hated me. He had only married me to maintain his career and get promoted. Now looking calmly at Ethan, who was growing furious and turning red in the face, I added, "If you're afraid of dying, don't go in. But if you do go in, don't expect me to save you." Ethan stared at me with pure hatred in his eyes. "Len Joe," he snapped. "Don't worry. Even if I'm burned to death, I won't let you save me. And from now on, stop telling people we were childhood friends. It's embarrassing. You couldn't even get into college. What right do you have to call yourself the childhood friend of someone like me, a rising star who got into a research lab right after graduation?" I nodded without a trace of hesitation. "Fine, just as you wish." The fire grew more intense. Ethan never made it inside. He hesitated at the lab entrance for a long time. But every time he stepped forward, the flames forced him back. In our past life, he had dared to act so recklessly because he knew I would risk everything to save him. But now, seeing that I refused, Ethan, who valued his life more than anything, had no choice but to give up. After the fire was extinguished, almost all of the research lab's work was destroyed. I turned and walked back home, took out my old high school textbooks, and started studying. The National College Entrance exam had only recently been reinstated, and in my past life, I missed the cutoff by just 1 point. Later, my injuries made me feel so inferior that I never dared to take the exam again. But this time, I planned to spend the next 2 months filling in all the gaps and patching every weakness. That night, furious that he hadn't been able to rescue the lab's research data in time, Ethan came storming toward me. Ethan banged hard on my door. Lauren Joe, do you have any idea that because of you, I couldn't save the research lab's data? If I had managed to retrieve that data, I could have avoided 10 years of detours in my career. It suddenly all made sense to me. In my previous life, when I saved him from the fire, the blaze hadn't gotten that bad yet. We could have safely evacuated, but Ethan insisted I go deeper into the lab to retrieve the data. That was what led to the severe burns all over my body. Understanding everything now? I looked at him with a mocking smile. I didn't stop you from going in. Why blame me now? If you didn't have the courage to go in, then take responsibility for it. Don't expect shortcuts. His expression darkened, a flicker of fire in his eyes as he glared at me, his voice raspy with rage. If you hadn't refused to help, would I have been afraid to go in? I'm not your dad or your mom. Why should I bear the consequences of every choice you make? I snapped right back. That one sentence shut him down. Ethan stood there, lips pressed tightly together, clearly trying to think of a way to pin the blame back on me. Just then, Janie Yu from next door stepped out of her house and walked over to stand beside Ethan with a soft, delicate expression on her face. Their eyes met in a gaze that lingered like invisible strings pulling them together. Lauren, she said sweetly, this is your fault. Ethan is the only college graduate on our street and a top researcher. You're just a nobody. If you could have saved him, it would have been your blessing. Her words triggered every emotion buried deep in my chest. Just by the way she stood there, it was obvious they had already been entangled long before. But Ethan still chose to marry the woman he hated most, me, just to get his promotion. No wonder he ended up resenting me so much. He tortured me to death. Suddenly, I remembered all those sleepless nights in my past life. I'd seen Ethan's shadow more than once slipping into Janie's house through her window. At the time, I thought I was imagining it. I even mentioned it to him once, but he only laughed coldly and said, Len Jiao, with the way you look, I wake up thinking I'm in a horror movie. You think I could sleep after that? My heart twisted with 1,000 tiny cuts. I never wanted to look like this. And those scars, those were from saving him. Why did I give him everything only to be humiliated in return? After that argument, the very next day, Janie spread the story all over the neighborhood about how I drove Ethan out of the house. Ever since, the neighbors looked at me with a strange mix of pity and contempt. This time, I let out a cold laugh and refused to back down. Then why didn't you throw yourself into the fire to save him? Janie, you were there too, weren't you? Seemed like you were deliberately hiding. That hit a nerve. Janie jumped like a startled cat. Lauren Joe, how dare you lie like that? I think you're just twisted inside. You wanted Ethan to die in the fire, and now you're trying to frame me. I smiled faintly, not confirming or denying it. I didn't have to, but I noticed the look in Ethan's eyes, dark and stormy. Finally, he said coldly, That's enough, Lauren. Tomorrow, come with me to the backwoods to collect wild boar feces for the lab. Do that and I'll forgive you. I couldn't help but laugh. It was exactly like before. Every time something involved Janie, he'd always find a way to brush it off, defend her without question. But when it came to me, I had to sacrifice everything without complaint. In my last life, I spent an entire night in the woods collecting that wild boar manure. My burns hadn't even healed yet. Some were on the verge of infection. But when I brought it back, filthy and exhausted, Ethan looked at me like I'd crawled out of a sewer. He said I smelled like a toilet. And worst of all, he credited Janie for the entire thing. That little favor got her recommended by the lab to a top university. After graduation, she walked straight into a job at the lab. The two of them were always together, perfectly in sync, while I hid at home like a disgrace. Thinking of all that, I bit the inside of my cheek until the flesh tore apart. A faint metallic sweetness spread across my tongue. I don't have time tomorrow, I said calmly. If you're too scared to go by yourself, why don't you ask Janie to go with you? She worships you. She'd probably love to tag along. As soon as the words left my mouth, Janie's expression twisted. She glared at me, eyes burning with resentment. Lauren Joe, what do you mean by that? Ethan's just asking you to help out a little, and you're already making excuses. Are you even his childhood friend anymore? I gave her a small, serene smile. Sorry, I said. I'm really not. With that, I turned to head back inside and continue studying. But Ethan's furious eyes locked on me. He stormed up and grabbed my arm tightly, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Just because you say we're not doesn't make it true. You've been telling everyone since we were kids that we were childhood sweethearts. And now I ask one small favor, and you're suddenly full of excuses. Don't you have any sense of decency? My face went cold, but my tone was light. Ethan, did you forget you were the one who said today we're no longer childhood sweethearts? You're the intellectual star of this street, a man working in a research lab. I'm just a girl from the countryside who couldn't even get into college. We're not a match. You said so yourself. There was a flicker of panic in his eyes. I shook off his hand and went back inside to study at my desk. Outside, I could faintly hear Janie's syrupy voice comforting him. Ethan, it's okay. If Lauren won't go with you, I will. It's just wild boar manure, right? With me there, you'll succeed for sure. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at her more gently than ever. His gaze drifted toward my window as he spoke. You really are the best, Janie. Not like someone who talks big but has no real heart. Even knowing he was doing it on purpose, those words still struck something deep inside me. After all the years I spent giving everything for him, it meant nothing. Not compared to a single sweet sentence from Janie. The next morning, before the sun even rose, I headed to the Education Bureau with my backpack. In my previous life, after missing my chance at college, I had once asked how a non-student could take the entrance exam. I found out I could apply through an equivalency certification, but because of the burns all over my body, I eventually gave up that dream. Now, I filed the application without hesitation. After spending an entire day taking the written test, I passed. I was finally eligible to take the college entrance exam. On the way home, filled with quiet joy, I happened to run into Ethan and Janie coming back from the woods, covered in dirt and blood. Ethan had several visible cuts and his clothes were torn all over. When he saw me smiling, he thought I was laughing at him. Furious, he stormed up to me, grabbed my wrist and yelled, "What are you laughing at, Lauren Shao? If you had helped, I wouldn't have gotten chased and rolled down a hill." I hadn't been laughing at him, but now I truly couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Ethan's face flushed red in humiliation. In a rage, he yanked me hard and knocked me to the ground. Then he kicked me in the back, stepping right over me. "You think you can mock me?" he growled. "I'll give you one last chance, Lauren Jo. Bring me that wild boar manure within 3 days, or don't expect me to ever speak to you again." I never expected him to suddenly turn violent. The pain was intense. I couldn't get up. I curled up on the ground, cold sweat pouring from my forehead. Janie followed suit, stepping right over me like it was nothing. "You make a great doormat," she said snidely. "So soft and squishy. I almost got bitten today because of you. Let's see how it feels to be stepped on." As if still not satisfied, she jabbed her toe into my side, twisting cruelly. I fought back the pain, flipped over, and threw her to the ground. Her shriek brought Ethan rushing back. Without hesitation, he slapped me hard across the face. "Who gave you the right to touch Janie?" he roared. Bent in pain, I licked the blood from the corner of my mouth, meeting his eyes with a blank, distant stare. I said nothing. I dragged myself home, packed my things in silence, and left. I rented a small room near the school and registered as an independent student. From that day on, I started going to school every day. As for the 3-day deadline Ethan gave me, it had long slipped my mind. Before I knew it, the day of the college entrance exam had arrived. To my surprise, Janie ended up in the same testing room as me. She looked at me with arrogance and sneered. "Lauren Jo, this college spot is mine. A loser like you shouldn't even bother struggling." I said nothing and focused all my energy on the test. Fortunately, all my hard work during the past months paid off. I was accepted into college. The day I picked up my college acceptance letter at the post office, I happened to run into the same education officer who had processed my equivalency application. He looked at me with a hint of regret and said, "Len, with scores like yours, why did you give up your spot at university?" My mind went blank. I hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed his hand. "Sir, I didn't give up my spot. There must be some mistake. He blinked in surprise. But your fiancé came with your household registration booklet, said the two of you were getting married, and asked us to process your withdrawal. We even mailed your withdrawal letter and gave the extra admission spot to another applicant. The world spun around me. I finally understood what Ethan had been plotting. In my past life, when we were married, Ethan had always known my national ID number. With his connections, getting a forged copy of my household registration would have been effortless. Back then, he had already withdrawn me from school behind my back. This time he'd done it again, only more skillfully. All he needed was for me to back down willingly. Then he could use his influence to get Janie slotted into my place through a recommendation. Just like that, my rightful college admission would be hers. That realization hit me like a club to the head. I rushed forward and grabbed the post office worker's arm. Please don't send that letter. I want to go to college. He and I have no relationship. He can't make decisions for me. My registration booklet has always been at my house. His version is a fake. When the staff heard the words forged government documents, they panicked. They immediately stopped the letter and called the police. Thankfully, the withdrawal paperwork was intercepted just in time. When the police arrived, they asked for a full statement. A short while later, I was sitting in the lobby of the police station when I saw Ethan and Janie brought in by the officers. Janie was as pale as a ghost. Ethan, on the other hand, stormed toward me the moment he saw me and pointed a finger in my face, shouting, "Luren Xiao, have you no shame? What did Janie ever do to you? Now you're accusing her of breaking the law." I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white, and looked coldly into Ethan's eyes. Whether she broke the law or not, the police will give us the answer. It doesn't matter how much you talk now. You can't hide your guilt. Don't treat me like I'm stupid, Ethan. His expression changed instantly, his eyes darted nervously, fingers trembling slightly. When he saw the officers escort Janie into the investigation room, he changed tactics and tried playing the emotional card. "Len," he said softly, "we can talk this through privately. There's no need to blow this up. And if you give up your college spot and let Janie take it instead, maybe I'll consider giving you a chance to marry me." He lifted his chin like he was doing me a huge favor, like this was some incredible gift I should be grateful for. I almost laughed. Just minutes ago, he was accusing me and defending Janie. Now he wanted to make a deal behind closed doors. He forged my household registration and made decisions about my education behind my back. Was that something we discussed privately? Besides, I earned my college spot fair and square. Why should I hand it over to her? Just then, a voice rang out in the station. "Ethan Green. Is Ethan Green here? Please cooperate with our investigation." Two uniformed officers walked in, their eyes immediately locking on Ethan. His face twisted in panic as he turned to look at me like he couldn't believe I had actually called the cops on him. Janie too had lost all the smugness she wore earlier. She lowered her head, wishing she could disappear. One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Green, we're with the local precinct. Please come with us." Ethan's face was now an ugly shade of gray, his body trembling slightly. Still clinging to a shred of hope, he tried to stand tall and asked, "What law did I break that you're taking me in for?" This time, I didn't wait for the officer to speak. I let out a cold laugh and cut Ethan down with my own words. "You impersonated my fiancé, stole my household registration, and tried to hand my college spot to someone else. With all those crimes, you really have no idea what you've done wrong." At my words, Ethan couldn't sit still anymore. He rushed to me, his face suddenly filled with fake tenderness as he reached for my hand. "Lauren," he said softly, "we already have that kind of relationship. Do we really have to blow things up over something this small? I was only thinking about our future. If you give up the university spot, I'll get engaged to you right away. How about that? Just drop the charges. I'll forgive you for what you've done." He spoke like he was sure I dreamed of marrying him, his tone shifting from carefully coaxing to commanding. Inside, I laughed coldly. In my past life, I loved him deeply, but he treated me like poison, like something to be eradicated. Now he came with these grand words just to get me to withdraw the charges and give up my spot at university. Seeing I stayed silent, Janie, encouraged by Ethan's words, stood up and came over to me. Lauren, sweetie, she said in that syrupy voice of hers. You should just say yes already. Ethan's finally willing to get engaged to you. If you go to college, you'll never get another chance like this. As for the university thing, well, I suppose I could reluctantly take your place. How generous of her, wanting the benefits without the burden. Acting like Ethan was some priceless treasure I should hurry up and snatch, like she was doing me a favor by stepping in. I gave a half smile and looked lazily at the two of them. Well, if Ethan is such a great catch, I'll gladly give him to you, Janie. But for now, I think you two should head over to the station and explain why you tried to steal my college admission. Ethan's face darkened with rising fury. In his mind, he had already stooped so low, offered me something he thought I'd kill for, and I still refused to back down. His voice rose sharply as he glared at me. Lorenzo, is that what it'll take? You want me to cut all ties with you before you'll drop this case? I simply raised my hand and shook my head. Nope, I said casually. Even if you cut all ties, I'm still not withdrawing the report. He froze, stunned, his face filled with fear and disbelief. His voice trembled. What did you say? I've begged you this much, and you still won't let it go. Don't you remember we grew up together? That finally broke something inside me. Even now, he was still trying to guilt me into forgiveness with old memories. But in my past life, that soft heart of mine brought nothing but pain. I stared at him coldly. No, I don't see you as anyone who has anything to do with me anymore. Ethan, you did this. You need to deal with the consequences yourself. Don't expect someone else to clean up your mess. Without another glance at his stunned expression, I turned to the officers and said, Officers, these two worked together to steal my college admission spot. They even stole my household registration from my home. I demand justice. As soon as the officers turned their attention toward them, Janie collapsed to the ground, her whole body limp. Ethan didn't look much better. Though he forced himself to stay standing, his eyes were dazed, like he was still hoping I'd let it go. You can't do this to me, Lauren, he pleaded. I'm right in the middle of an important promotion evaluation. You can't ruin my record now. I said nothing and watched them both being taken away. Now you're scared. A little too late for that. Not long after Ethan and Janie were taken into custody, the police quickly uncovered the full details of the case. Everything was clear-cut, and under questioning, neither of them could keep their story straight. The officer from the Education Bureau later reached out to me to explain how the case was handled. Janie, having used such underhanded means to try to steal a university spot, was banned from taking the entrance exam, and might even face prison time. Ethan managed to avoid jail, but as an accomplice, he didn't escape punishment. Most importantly, the incident was reported to the Research Institute, completely ruining Ethan's chances of getting promoted in this year's evaluation. After hearing the outcomes for both of them, I didn't feel particularly happy, just relieved enough to ask the education officer cautiously, now that everything's settled, there won't be any more issues with me going to college, right? Don't worry, Lauren, the teacher reassured me. Everything's been handled. You can proceed with your admission. There won't be any more problems. At his words, the heavy weight on my chest finally lifted. I went home to pack, rolling up my bedding and tying it with military green canvas straps. Just as I was sorting through the last of my things, a sharp knock echoed from the door. I opened it to find Ethan standing outside, looking utterly disheveled. His hair was blown into a mess by the wind, and his jacket was damp with rain. When he saw me, he let out a breath of relief like he'd finally found solid ground. His eyes flicked past me and landed on the neatly packed luggage behind me. Lauren, he asked, voice cautious. So, you're really heading off to college now? I stood there silently. Ethan pressed his lips together, then looked at me with what I could only guess was his attempt at regret. College is tough. You'll be swamped with books, exams, research. But since you've decided to go, I'll support you. From now on, just focus on school. I'll help take care of your living expenses. I stared at him, stunned. These were words I never thought he was capable of saying. A sarcastic smile crept onto my face. No need, I said coolly. This is my business. It has nothing to do with you. And by the way, I'm Lauren, Joe, the person you hate the most. Remember? Not Janie. Don't get us confused. If there's nothing else, I'd like to get some rest. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I slammed the door shut. That night, I had the feeling Ethan never left. A shadow lingered outside my window for hours. The next morning, as I stepped out with my bags to catch the old green train, there he was, standing stiffly and waiting. When he saw me, a weak smile crept across his pale face. "Lauren," he said, "let me take you to the station." I frowned hard. I couldn't figure him out. I'd made my stance clear, but it was like he'd turned into a completely different person. Clingy, even desperate. When he reached for my luggage, I yanked it back with both hands and glared at him. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" I snapped. "I told you you and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. Can you please stop clinging to me?" His expression turned pained. He furrowed his brow and stammered. "It's not like that, Lauren. I just want to walk you there." I didn't say another word. I got on a borrowed old bicycle and started pedaling toward the train station. He didn't have a bike, yet he ran after me the whole way. By the time we got there, he was panting heavily, his face white as a sheet. But even then, I didn't spare him a second glance. I locked the bike outside for my parents to pick up later and headed for the platform with my luggage. Just as I was about to pass through the ticket gate, Ethan lunged forward and grabbed my hand. Forcing himself to speak, he asked, "Len, is it really you? Have you come back too? Otherwise, you wouldn't be treating me like this." I froze for a moment. My heart instinctively paused. I turned back and gave him a sidelong glance. On the surface, his face was calm, but his eyes were churning with stormy emotion. "I remembered everything after I left the station," he said softly. "Lauren, in our past life, we were married. You were the one who pulled me out of that fire." I smiled faintly and tapped my finger against my temple. "Ethan, is your brain not working? You never went into that fire. And even if you had, I wouldn't have saved you. Talking about past lives now? Why not throw in the next life while you're at it?" His eyes filled with panic as I pulled my hand away and stepped onto the train. Just as it began to move, he broke free and rushed after me, only to be tackled to the ground by security. Even pinned down, he screamed after me. "Lauren, stop pretending," Ethan shouted. "I know you came back." I didn't know how Ethan suddenly remembered our past life, but I wasn't curious, and I certainly didn't feel the slightest stir in my heart because of anything he did. In my previous life, he was the one who killed me. No matter the reason, I could never forgive someone who personally destroyed me. After riding the train for 2 full days and nights, I finally arrived in the city where my university was located. I had only ever heard people talk about how hard college life was. But standing in front of that campus gate, I suddenly felt an overwhelming hope for the future. For the first time in both this life and the last, I was about to start my college journey. I met many new classmates and friends. One day, as I went to the boiler room to fetch hot water for a shower, my roommate came running up to me. "Lauren, someone called for you." Puzzled, I went to the door manager's office to take the call. As soon as I picked up and heard the faint sound of breathing on the other end, I immediately knew who it was. I had to admit, Ethan was quite resourceful. He had actually tracked down my university and even the landline number of my dormitory. "Ethan, what do you want?" Hearing me call his name directly, he didn't bother pretending anymore. "Lauren, I'm in the capital right now. Can we meet? There's something I need to explain to you." He actually came all the way to the capital. I frowned. "Sorry, I have a heavy academic workload. I don't have time to see you." "You don't have to come out," he rushed to say. "I'll come in to find you." "Okay." Before I could fully reject him, he cut me off again. "The lab I'm with is partnering with your university. I came with the team." "Well, that's not necessary. I have things to do. I'm hanging up." I ended the call without another word. Less than 2 seconds later, the phone rang again. I looked at the number on the landline and simply unplugged it. The room fell into silence. My roommate glanced at me curiously. It was rare for anyone to see me act so cold. "Was that someone you know?" she asked. "Just an annoying stranger I'd rather forget." But despite trying to avoid Ethan, fate clearly had other plans. Thanks to my excellent grades, I was selected by my professor to attend an academic exchange meeting. And wouldn't you know it, the event turned out to be part of the very collaboration Ethan had mentioned. In a medium-sized conference room, Ethan spotted me the moment he walked in. His eyes lit up like he'd found something he'd been searching for. During the entire session, he never looked away. His gaze was fixed on me the whole time. After the meeting, his behavior hadn't gone unnoticed. My professor looked amused and asked, "Dr. Green, I noticed you kept watching our Lauren. Is there something on your mind?" Ethan's eyes widened slightly and his voice caught with emotion. "Actually, I haven't seen Lauren in a long time. We grew up together, childhood friends." Before he could finish, I cut in coldly. "Dr. Green and I used to live on the same street. That's all. Just neighbors who knew each other a bit better than usual." My professor nodded in understanding while the light in Ethan's eyes shattered, turning instantly dim. That evening, I reluctantly attended a dinner with the delegation. Ethan tried to sit next to me, but I blocked the seat with my bag. My professor seemed to sense the tension and asked what was going on. I replied evenly, "Dr. Green is in love with a neighbor back home. I'd rather not get caught up in gossip, so I keep my distance." The professor nodded knowingly and had Ethan sit elsewhere, leaving him looking hollow and lost. I barely touched my food and slipped away early with an excuse. But I hadn't expected Ethan to follow me out. "Len, do we really have to be like this?" he asked, catching up with me. "We're the only two people in this world who truly know each other." I stopped and looked around at the crowded restaurant. I didn't want to make a scene. "Dr. Green," I said flatly, "I don't know what you're talking about." Every word I said earlier was sincere. If anything came off as disrespectful, I hope you won't take it to heart. I paused, then added with a small smile. "If anyone knows you best, it should be Janie. She should be getting out of prison soon, right? You should focus on figuring out how to marry her." That part one picked up from some gossip I overheard near Janie's home. Back then, Ethan had been doing everything he could to distance himself from her responsibility. Ethan had only agreed to marry Janie, so she'd willingly take the fall for stealing my college spot. That's why his punishment ended up being so light. He glanced at me, guilt flickering in his eyes, but didn't dare respond to what I'd said. After living with me for so many years in our past life, he knew my personality well. He could see clearly that I was completely resolute. His throat tightened and he said with a bitter tone, "Len, it was all just a misunderstanding. You know the person I've always loved." Under my sharp gaze, that final word caught in his throat. He didn't dare say it. In both this life and the last, he had never loved me. At most, what he felt now was just resentment over losing control. In our previous life, I had given everything for him. Now I avoided him at every turn, and that made him deeply unwilling to accept the outcome. "Dr. Green," I said coolly, "a person shouldn't lie, or else karma will catch up to them." I had said it casually, just in passing, but not long after, he sank into depression. After college, I was offered a position as the technical director at the research institute. I thought about it for a long time before accepting. It was the closest workplace to home, and the benefits were excellent. Ironically, in this life, without his promotion, Ethan ended up as my subordinate. At the welcome banquet celebrating my appointment, Ethan looked like he'd aged 10 years. Head lowered, back bent, he bowed and raised a glass to me. "Congratulations, Lauren." I nodded and accepted the gesture just as I did with everyone else, fairly and without distinction. That night, out of nowhere, Janie showed up. Somehow, she had found out I joined the institute. Years in prison had changed her completely. Her once pristine face was now wrinkled, her skin sallow, her posture hunched. Compared to me at that moment, the difference between us was night and day. She couldn't even meet my gaze. Gripping Ethan's collar tightly, she snapped, "Ethan, is it because Lauren's back? Is that why you're stalling on marrying me? Don't forget, I took the fall for you. If you don't keep your promise, I'll tell everyone what really happened. I'll ruin you." Ethan quickly reached out to cover her mouth, but it was too late. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Colleagues began pointing and muttering. The institute's leadership, already displeased with Ethan, didn't hesitate. They fired him the very next day. The next time I saw the two of them was about a month later on my way to work. Ethan had lost his job at the institute, but he'd still gone through with marrying Janie. To make a living, he'd resorted to running a street stall. When I occasionally returned to my old neighborhood, I could often hear Janie screaming at him. "You useless piece of trash. Still dreaming of miracles. You worked at the institute all those years and didn't save a penny. You even got fired. Look at Lauren now. She's out of your league. She wouldn't even spare you a glance." Then came Ethan's angry, embarrassed shouting, trying to fight back, but clearly no match for Janie. One time I saw Ethan get kicked out of the house, his face covered in scratch marks. When they saw me on the street, both froze. Janie had a swollen eye, clearly bruised from a fight. She slammed the door and hid, terrified I'd use the situation against her. Ethan hung his head low and ran off without saying a word. I later heard that the two of them were constantly fighting. The worst time, Ethan beat Janie with a wooden stick and broke her leg. When I heard about it, I simply shook my head. She had once been the person he claimed to love above all else. Now he nearly beat her to death, but none of that had anything to do with me anymore. The days ahead were still long, and I was finally ready to begin a brand new life.